What up? It's time for the most poorly timed live show on the internet. Yay.
Hey, people love a good midday chat.
A good post-lunch conversation. A good post-lunch live stream. That's what we'll call it. I saw Quantamania this week. That was fun.
I was going to say thumbs up or down because I was seeing a bunch of negative reactions to it.
Meh. So I'm kind of indifferent on it. I like Paul Rudd, and it was fine. One thing that I've decided is I'm not going to see any more 3D movies unless I have to.
Yeah. Okay.
Because in this case, it was the only showing at the time that I wanted to go see it. And it was a matinee, so it was reasonably cheap.
Right.
And so I went. But I remember when movies started coming out in 3D, and it was like an event. It was like, oh my gosh, it's in 3D. We got to go see it. Like Avatar was the first really good 3D movie that I can recall. And now it's like any movie with a lot of CGI in it. I feel like it's like you just like flip a switch and it's in 3D and you just move on. But like not all movies are made for 3D.
Right.
And I was sitting there like I felt like a chore to watch this movie. Like my eyes were like tired by the end of it. So
yeah, I made the mistake of going to the movie theater to see Green Lantern, but also seeing Green Lantern in 3D, and that was horrible.
Well, like I saw Avatar in 3D, the new one, and it's like it's made for 3D, so it's supposed to be there.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's like, oh, it's just we can charge $3 extra a ticket if we show it in 3D. So we're
for these glasses, right?
Like I don't think it even costs more to produce in 3D. It's just like it's just they produce a blurry version of the movie. And anyway,
that's overall a worthy addition to the Marvel comic universe. Or
so the thing I'll say about the Ant-Man franchise is they're not the most important in terms of like, oh, I got all these characters and whatnot. Like he's a bit character in a lot of other movies, but they do have like really important plot points that you have to be aware of to know what's going on in several movies. Like if you didn't know what happened in Ant-Man, the second Ant-Man, you would have no idea what was going on in Endgame. Like where did he come from? What's happening? I don't like, so it's like, and that was the whole premise for the movie. Right. And so that's kind of the case here where it's like the movie itself was like, oh, this is fun. There's ants and stuff. And but then like it's setting up like 6 other movies. So you have to see it. And I think that's why people get annoyed with it, was because like they have to go see it and they don't like it. But I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. Anyway, this is a sports podcast.
No, but I'll say in general, I just think the saturation of Marvel over the streaming services too, just it's hard to keep things fresh, I guess, in the whole perspective of things. It's easy to get burnt out on all the Marvel stuff.
It's at least unique, right? Like it's not something they've done before, so I'll give it the credit for that. But yeah, anyway, that's that. Now I get to wait for the next one.
Did they talk about Derek Carr at all in Quantumania?
Yes, he is in the quantum realm. Talking to his agent. His agent is Kang. No. Anyway, yeah. So I saw that. That was my week. That was my Mardi Gras recovery. I sat in a movie theater.
I've been binging The Last of Us since everybody's been talking about it.
It was only like 5 episodes.
What's that?
It's only like 5 episodes, although they're like an hour long. Yeah, they're long episodes.
But yeah, caught up. That was an easy, going through all that. It's pretty interesting. You got to love the actor playing Mandalorian during the show. Every time I hear him talking, though, I want him to say "this is the way" during the show, but obviously that's not going to happen.
He does have such a distinct voice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm actually so while I'm watching that, I'm replaying the game because I played it a long time ago, but I never finished it. So I'm like playing the game through up to the point that the show is, and then I'm stopping and waiting for the next episode.
So the game pretty much follows the TV show follows the game pretty much
to an extent, right?
Yeah, okay.
Like a lot of the dialogue specifically is pulled directly from the game. But like the circumstances for like how they get into the stuff, like for example, in the show they end up in Kansas City, in the game they're in Pittsburgh, and there's a lot of different things that like develop, but like you meet a lot of the same characters. Um, the
But
Bill and Frank.
they do end up in Kansas City for that. Was it the last episode?
No, right. They do in the show, but
Yeah, yeah.
in the game they're in Pittsburgh, right?
I got
So
you.
like there's some details like that, but like a lot of the dialogue is like word for word, which is kind of funny to see. Anyway, so it's 2 o'clock. So we have officially vamped our way through the pre-show part of this. This is going to be a Saints podcast whenever we get it going. And building on the theme of last week, we are going to be in mock draft mania again. But this time we did the mock drafts, so we're the ones that are going to be wrong. It's going to be a good time.
Yeah, I mean, then everyone can remember what we had to say and use that against us in the future.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And if I'm right, I will bring it up. If I'm wrong, you will never hear about this again. That's how
I
this
wonder
works.
how many pre-combine NFL mock drafts were correct.
Ever of all time. That's a tough statistic to find.
Just saying it. There's obviously so much information still coming in about these prospects, but you have a pretty good idea of where guys stand from their obvious film, their film, from playing the game. You don't necessarily need to see how a workout warrior does at the combine to move them up or down your draft board kind of thing.
See, the funny thing to me, and we can talk more about this on the show, is like I don't know how much the actual workouts influence someone's draft status beyond like, oh, that guy's actually really slow and we didn't notice it. Like occasionally you'll find someone who like I think it was Demontre Moore from Texas A&M. He could only get like 2 reps up on the 225-pound bench press. This guy's a defensive end. Like that's not good. Like he's a speed rusher, but like he was like projected to be like a top 5 pick, and then he went to the combine, and they're like, you can't lift like 225 pounds. Sounds like a lot until you're put it in the perspective of a professional athlete, and you're like I can I can bench 225 pounds. I do it like twice. That puts me on par with Demontre Moore, and so like those are the things where like if you see someone who's like incredibly fast, like great, cool, we knew he was fast. We like that's fun and all, but that's not going to change someone's draft status. Whereas like the stuff we don't see actually does impact people's draft status. Like when they sit in the meeting and they get asked questions, their answers that are wildly off base, or like they get asked about their habits and their answers are like terrible. Like that's then the teams are like, yeah, that's probably bad. Anyway, like but we don't get any of that. We don't know any of that. And so that's why everyone reacts to 40 times and broad jump scores and high jumps. And anyway,
And obviously that all that intimate time, one-on-one time you get with the players off the field at like the combine, also like the Senior Bowl, way more valuable than any of the quote unquote workout, what you're seeing these guys doing on the field. Because I think the game footage obviously tells you everything. The Senior Bowl is obviously great to see some guys from smaller schools maybe get their stock risen for what they're able to do against that increase in competition you see there.
Right. Like guys you haven't been able to watch. Like you can't physically watch everybody, but it just gives you a chance to
It's
go.
pretty tough.
Like, yeah. But all right, let's get this thing rolling here. As always, this is the Thursday episode. We're gonna do a live mailbag in the final segment. So if you have questions or comments, throw them in the chat, and we will get to them as many as possible in the back end of this poorly timed 2 p.m. live stream. But it just means that you have a better chance of getting your question answered because who the heck is watching this? They're at work. They're busy. They're like banking and stuff. I assume that's what people do at 2 p.m. on a Thursday is they do their banking. It's not what I do.
It's definitely going to be almost time to pick up the kiddos from school. Although they're probably off still from Mardi Gras. Never mind.
Yes, for those of you who have kids that are not dogs.
Fur babies?
Yeah. Anyway. Whenever you're ready, let's get this thing started.
All righty. Time to go inside Black and Gold. Steve Geller along with Jeff Nowak. And we have a big rundown leading into this show, looking at some mock drafts that not who maybe some other NFL analysts have done, but things that Jeff and I went through on the Pro Football Focus simulator, getting the first 3 rounds of the Saints draft we'll give to you, and also updating on some, I guess, contract details of some of the Saints getting some players signed to new deals and also reworking a few contracts.
Yes, that's what we're going to do. We're going to be the ones wrong this time. We have our mock drafts, our first post Senior Bowl, pre combine mock drafts that are certainly going to change. We let the simulator do all of the picks that were not the Saints because I'm not going to pretend I know who the Detroit Lions are going to pick, right? Like, so I'm not going to do that to you. But we kind of get a pool of players and then we pick the player we're going to go with, and then we go to the next round, and we did 3 rounds. So we're going to go through that. In the second segment, we're going to give you each of our picks. But in this first segment, we're going to go through a couple of things that have happened since we recorded on Monday. One of those things is TJ Jones from State of the Saints podcast. He included us in his top podcasts of the Saints universe, or whatever he called it. So I do want to thank him for that. That was really nice of him to do.
Appreciate it, TJ.
Yeah, go check him out if you haven't already. He does a really good job. Moving on to that, one of the things that did happen this week is the franchise tag window opened, right? That was on Tuesday, where teams could start putting franchise tags on their players. And whenever that happens, you ask the question, okay, are there any Saints players who might be given the franchise tag? It doesn't happen that often. The most recent one was Marcus Williams in the 2021 season, which the Saints used to essentially keep him around for an extra season and then let him walk in free agency. It's the reason you don't see it employed very often is basically because it's a very expensive way to retain a player on your team. So it's like you would most likely want to hammer out a long-term deal with that guy. But if you can't and you still want to keep him around, as was the case with Marcus, then that's where you end up. But like, for example, in order to franchise tag a quarterback, which is like kind of what the Ravens are trying to think about with Lamar Jackson right now, that's a $32.4 million 1-year contract.
Yeah.
So you are not getting a discount. And there's a few options in the franchise tag. You can do an exclusive franchise tag, which is the average of I believe the top 5 quarterback salaries at the position. You could do just a regular franchise tag, which is the average of the top 5 over the last 5 years. I believe it might be top 10. I always forget. But either way, that's the number. That's the $32.4 million. But that allows other teams to negotiate with that player and sign them to an offer sheet. And if you choose not to match it, then you get 2 first-round picks back. So, like, that's the difference. Whereas if it was an exclusive franchise tag, no one could come in and negotiate with them at all. Then there's the transition tag, which is a slightly lower number. But if someone signs them to an offer sheet and you choose not to match it, then you don't get any compensation. So that's kind of where that is. But either way, so linebackers, you're talking $28.9 million. Wide receiver, $19.7 million. Defensive end, $19.7 million. Defensive tackle, $18.9 million. Offensive lineman, $18.2. Cornerback, $18.1. And safeties, $14.4. $11.3 for tight ends. And then running backs, bottom of the barrel, other than kickers, I guess, $10.1 million. So you kind of establish, okay, well, who are the players that you could use this on? And the names that come to mind first: cornerback Bradley Roby, defensive tackle David Onyemata, defensive end Marcus Davenport, and linebacker Caden Ellis.
Yeah, to me, that doesn't scream that you would franchise any of those guys, in my opinion. I would hopefully sign Caden Ellis to a long-term deal. That's definitely one to watch for me for this team, that I'm curious to see how much he's going to end up commanding after having that breakout season. But other than that, I don't really see a franchise tag guy on the list. I do think bringing back, between Onyemata and Marcus Davenport, I think you'd like to have both, but I think having one of the two brought back is pretty important for this defensive line. And I'm just not sold, obviously, on Marcus Davenport as a prospect anymore. But I think for what you've invested in him,
Right.
with your, draft wise and time, time scouting development, it's really hard to let him go, kind of deal. But I mean, we saw a guy like Trey Hendrickson get paid big bucks by the Bengals and leave. But I don't see a team doing that with Davenport, because there's been the flashes, they just haven't been consistent enough.
Yeah, so I think you have until March 7th to put a tag on somebody. Let me
Okay.
double check that. Um, yes, March 7th. And so, yeah, so like you mentioned, I think that Caden Ellis is a guy who you want to negotiate a long-term deal with. If you did put a franchise tag on him, it would probably be just to give yourself a little more time to work out that deal. I would be incredibly disappointed if they allowed him to walk in free agency, just because you develop guys, you want to keep them. Right? You're
Absolutely.
not developing players for other teams, and if you are, then that's a mistake. The interesting one is Bradley Roby, and it's only interesting to me because you do need depth at cornerback, and so
Yeah.
you are going to have to bring in somebody if you let Bradley Roby walk in free agency. And do you think you can do that at a reasonable cost? If you don't, keep in mind that, like, while 18 million sounds like a lot, you are able to work with that number. If you remember, they signed Marcus Williams, it was about 14 point something million that season, and they were able to restructure it and convert a good amount of that into a signing bonus. So it's not like, oh, you have to clear the cap space and blah, blah, blah. You do initially, but you can recoup it by turning a good amount of it into dead money down the road, right? So that's a part of this equation too. There's always money in the banana stand. And so, like, we saw quickly last year how devastated that position group can get with a few injuries. You were starting Chris Harris in meaningful reps. I think it was against the 49ers last year. You started Chris Harris, and he
Yeah.
got called for a pretty pivotal penalty during that game. I think, he got called for a penalty that eliminated Alante Taylor's interception that I think would have been brought back for a touchdown. So, like, if you don't think you can bring in quality defensive back depth, then he's an option. But the guy, I think, if anyone gets it, and I still think it's unlikely you put it on anybody, but if anyone were to get it, it would probably be David Onyemata. And the reason being, he's 30 years old. I don't know if you want to commit a long-term deal to him, but the defensive interior is probably the thinnest group on the team, and you are also likely losing Kentavious Street in free agency. So even if you load up in the draft, are you banking on young players to anchor your interior defensive line, or is one more season of David Onyemata at about a $10 million raise worth it? It would also keep him away from Ryan Nielsen in Atlanta, which would be the same argument I would make for Marcus Davenport. I think I made this argument earlier in the offseason, or maybe later in the season, is like, you've sunken a lot into Marcus Davenport, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
And maybe just kind of a one season redo of that contract year for both sides would be the best option. And you kind of just bank on, okay, we're going to give him this tag, see what he does. If he comes back to form, which he has the talent to do, then great. If he doesn't, it's one season, then you're out the door, and you tried. So that's my other case. But again, like, I don't think this is a team that still needs to clear $46 million against the cap, or maybe it's 35 million now. I can't remember. I don't see it as likely.
Yeah, I think that was interesting too, because I completely didn't even think about, obviously, Ryan Nielsen come in trying to take some of these defensive line prospects with him to Atlanta, but that is a huge obvious possibility. And yeah, you mentioned Kentavious Street. That's probably a done deal, since that's a guy that has followed him since college, kind of deal.
Yeah, it would be if I had to bet on any free agent signing, it would be
Right
Kentavious
now, right?
Street going to Atlanta. Like, it would be weirder if he didn't. But yeah. So we can probably move on from that. So there have been two players the Saints have signed thus far. One is backup offensive lineman Calvin Throckmorton, which good depth, and then Keith Kirkwood. So you're talking about very low level extensions at this point.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, Throckmorton definitely just an asset in the fact that, you know, there's going to be injuries along the offensive line, and has shown to be someone that's able to fill in. How good, though, I guess, is a big question.
Yeah, I don't want to see Calvin Throckmorton starting anymore.
No, right.
Right? Like he needs to be a last resort option, but in these past 2 seasons, he has been a second resort option. I don't know how many resorts do you have? It's kind of a weird phrase. How many resorts are there before the last one? I don't know.
I
But
guess it depends, right?
yeah, and so, one of the things you're going to try to figure out now is you're trying to get under the salary cap, which you're about 35.5 million away from after you converted 12.92 million of Ryan Ramchek's salary into a signing bonus, which saved you about 10 million against the cap. And then you have reduced Will Lutz's salary by 1.5 million. And it sounds like he's kind of replaced that with incentives, which to me is kind of like, we want to keep you around, Will, but we need to save money on it. So if you do this, this, and this, well, you'll get your money anyway. But we're kind of banking on, yeah, like this will save us money out front. And then if you have a great season, you still get your money. But we can only keep you around if we can bet on you having a great season, because he was rough last year. And I think potentially moving on from him was a real question this offseason. But I think you got the answer with that move, that they're going to end up keeping Will Lutz around for at least one more year.
Yeah, and sadly, the year even before that, we went through kicker nightmare with Lutz being injured, and I think these past 2 seasons, really shines a light on how important that place kicker can be for you. There's plenty of times this season the Saints lost a close game, and you could put it on the shoulders of, the kicker. Sadly, sad to say, but those close games, those 3 points come in pretty handy.
I almost think that what happened in the 2021 season when you were without Lutz is what saved his job after a rough 2022 season, because that
Yes.
kicker purgatory isn't fun. And so you probably feel like the odds of him bouncing back are better than you plucking a kicker out that's ready to go and you can trust. Like everyone, like even I think I said this late in the season, like Brett Maher was fantastic throughout the year, but then the Cowboys got into the playoffs and he missed 5 extra points. Never seen anything like it. It's just wild. And they kept throwing him out there. He kept missing. It was just the strangest thing.
No,
So
right.
I mean, like, yeah,
you and me
there's
are
a
screaming
reason.
at the TV going, "Go for 2 already."
Yeah, that was the wild thing, is they didn't go for 2 after he missed 5 in a row. But he came back. He made a couple kicks in that loss to who'd they lose to? Not the Eagles. 49ers?
Yeah.
Yes, and that lost to the 49ers. So you can't put that completely on him. But that was nuts. So I mean, like, right. So if your backup option is Brett Maher, I think you're better off hoping that Will Lutz has just that kind of bounce back season, was an aberration, and hopefully this year, because like the leg was there. It's not like he couldn't make the kicks; he just missed them, and that's the weird thing. Like he hit from 60 yards, and then he missed from 63 by like an inch.
Right, and
So,
that
like,
wasn't that was still on target, but it was just,
yeah,
unfortunately.
if it was a yard closer, he would have made it. And so, like, his leg's not like the ability is still there. It's just like his rangefinder was off. So anyway, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
that'll definitely be a big one for, a storyline for next season at the start of training camp when we're trying to, muster up storylines. It's going to be a bounce back season, definitely, for a healthy Will Lutz.
Yep, I agree. So yeah, so by my count, my guess is there are at least 5 more restructures incoming. Cam Jordan is going to save you 10 million. Marshawn Lattimore is going to save you 10 million. Taysom Hill is going to save you 6.6. Demario Davis is going to save you 5.87. And Tyrann Matthews is going to save you 4.37. And the reason all these guys are on that list is because they're people who you're definitely going to have on the roster next year, and probably beyond that. Like, so those are the players that you don't mind restructuring because you're going to accept dead money, but you're going to be like the dead money is going to start clearing while they're on the roster. Whereas like you could uh, restructure Jameis's deal and save 8 million, but you're probably going to cut him, and that's really not going to work for you. You can save 12 million by cutting him at post June 1st. So I think that's what you do. But it's going to be interesting to see how they get there. Either way, I think you're seeing how quickly chunks get taken out of this cap imbalance, and I wouldn't be surprised if by the beginning of March we're right there.
No, that's why every year you see everybody flipping out about how much in the negative the Saints are, and then when we get to talk to Mickey, he's always up there smiling coyly, saying, "Yeah, we'll get things wrapped up, and things will get happening behind the scenes, and whatever magic they're able to work." It's pretty amusing though that on how masterfully that they are able to manipulate the cap.
I do enjoy the tweets when they come out. I feel like this morning was like Field Yates or maybe Tom Pelissero, and so
There's
because
another
the
one.
conversation under the tweet is always the exact same thing. It was like, "How long can the Saints keep doing this?" And then someone responds, "Forever." And then they're like, "What do you mean?" And they're like, "That's how it works." And then you like go down 3 tweets, and then it's the same conversation again. And then it's like someone quote tweeting it saying, "Wow, what idiots! I can't believe they're doing this." Blah blah blah. And then someone responds who's like, "What do you mean? It's the way they planned it." And like, "Yeah, but they should be doing what the Bucks are doing and starting Kyle Trask." I'm like, no, no, no,
Well,
please
we'll
don't.
see how that goes for Tampa, and if that's really their future road.
I mean, and so this is something that I know Nick Underhill talks about a lot. Is like, yeah, it seems like the Bucks are actively trying to tank. Done it? Is that it? But like, would you be happy if that was what your team was doing? Like, oh great, yeah, we get to hate this football team for a full year because they're not even trying to win.
Well, even how does a guy, established veteran, and I don't like the guy, so good for him, but I got someone like Mike Evans, when you're seeing that, it's like, really, this is what we're going with this year?
Yeah, and like I've always felt like you can. It's really difficult to train a team to play winning football, but it's really easy to train a team to play losing football.
Absolutely.
And actively doing that, that's a good way to make a bad team bad. Um, and it's funny because like the Bucks, people are gonna point to the Bucks and say they're doing this right, and it's just hilarious to me that Tom Brady choosing you is how it's like the Nets, right? Like when Kyrie Irving and James Harden and Kevin Durant all chose the Nets, the GM was getting a ton of credit. Like he did something right. It's like, no, they told you they were going to play there and you signed them. And that's the same thing the Bucks did. And then those players leave and you're like, well, crap, what are we going to do now? And then we all realize, well, you weren't that good of a GM in the first place because your only recourse is, oh yeah, we'll just start Kyle Trask and see what happens. So I don't know. It's silly.
I find it hard to believe that's really going to be the direction, but yeah, we'll see what happens there.
Well, so we want to talk about salary cap hell.
Yes.
There's one team that is more into the salary cap hole than the Saints, and that is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a
Yeah,
team that is not designed to purge the cap the way the Saints are. I mean, they do it similarly, but they don't. I mean, this isn't a multi-year process the way the Saints do it. Like they're in that hole because they wanted to make it work with Tom Brady. And that's why the Saints were in that hole, but like that was a 5-year buildup before it even happened. This was oh crap, Tom showed up. We got to do this. So it's good. It is going to be funny, but hey, if you're going to if the only team that was reasonably competitive in the NFC South last year is openly tanking, that just gives you more reason to be like, well, yeah, this is our division for the taking. Like all we have to do is put a reasonable roster out there and we're going to win the NFC South. And so that's kind of where I see it.
See, to me, obviously, and I think you would agree too, the Saints were right there. They just had some really boneheaded, dumbfounded endings to games that cost them probably 3 victories, I could say. And boom, right there, you're a 10-win team, obviously.
What were the 3 wins?
I would say let's see, the
Obviously,
game.
Bucks week 13.
Oh, for sure. That one was just an abomination of
Bengals week 6.
yeah, you felt like they did everything right in that game. And
They ran for 240 yards in that game.
I definitely remember scratching my head going, wait a minute, how did we lose this?
Yeah, and then probably Bucks week 2
Yeah, that one
would be the game
as
that they had the best chance to win and lost.
yeah, to me too, I would say that the San Francisco game, there were just it doesn't seem that way because it was 13-0, but they were close to getting in the red zone there a few times and
They
just
had a chance to be competitive in that game. I don't think they were that close to winning that game. Like,
right. I guess
they had
you're
a
right there.
chance to be reasonably like one of the reasons the 49ers only had 13 points is because they didn't have to be aggressive whatsoever.
Right.
So like I don't know about that. The Steelers game, I might argue just because they were tied 10-10 at halftime and the Steelers aren't that good.
No, but I remember that just being so ugly in that second half.
Right. Right.
Ugh.
But yeah, so but I mean
Yeah,
the Bucks game in the third quarter they were tied 3-3 and they had the ball in the red zone and they fumbled. So I would put that on that list.
Yeah, I was just saying that the Saints
and you
are
win
right,
either of those Bucks games, you probably win the division.
right. And I mean, you could even look at that game in London to the Vikings.
Yeah, that's a good one too. You led with like 5 minutes left.
we were pretty good at that last year.
Yeah. Anyway. All right. Yeah. The last thing that we don't need to talk about that much is there's more Alvin Kamara video out there. We talked about this in the last episode. I don't think it changed things materially from where we were. Because like this is the same video that we saw from TMZ in November, just a less grainy version. There was actually a second video that came out in that same post that shows from the reverse angle. And I actually think in the grand scheme of things, knowing what we know, that video actually did absolve Alvin Kamara of one key thing, which was one of the big issues with this beatdown was that not that it was a fight, it was that the guy was on the ground and people were stomping on his face. And what the reverse angle shows you is while he was involved in the fight, he basically stopped and picked up his phone and walked away. And the people he was with went to town. And so it kind of makes you, it's like one of the reasons that this whole thing is annoying to me is Alvin Kamara the worst offender here? Or is he just the guy with the most money? Because there are people that were stomping on this man's face, but all we hear about is Alvin's involvement.
Yeah, and the limousine video that came out is just dirty, man. That's hard to see. Obviously, Alvin making comments about him hitting the guy in the face pretty good, and
he did. Right. And so, like,
it's just a bad look of him, obviously, quote unquote, bragging about it afterwards.
Yeah, it's not good for him. But like the felony part of this is like the substantial bodily harm part. It's not getting in a fight in a nightclub, which happens all the time, right? And so if I'm his lawyer, I'm saying the bodily harm was not caused by him getting a couple punches thrown at him by one person. It was caused by this group, and that he was not really in. So that's kind of where that's what I would argue. I'm not a lawyer, obviously, because I'm here on a Tuesday. On a Thursday at 2 p.m.
I will say if Kamara's defense team, from what we're hearing, is going for the quote unquote self-defense, angle, that's pretty hard to convince anyone in that video.
Yes, but the other thing that's annoying to me is there still is no footage of like the actual beginning of this engagement. Like the videos, both of them. I mean, the one from the bathroom angle, the bathroom hallway angle, you can it actually goes longer, but you can't see it. And so like, yes, we see the end, but we have no idea whether it was started by anything in particular, which is annoying because that video must exist because the cops have seen it. But the only videos that were released are the end, which to me indicates that they're being released by a certain side of the equation, because that's just how it works. But
Yeah, how did Mr. Busby get involved with all this again?
because he's the NFL guy.
It seems that way. Oh.
Yeah. Anyway, all right. That's not that we got a little off track there. But we're gonna come back. We're gonna talk about the mock drafts.
Mock it up?
And we're gonna start with Steve's because we want to get the one that's really wrong out of the way first.
I'm not gonna disagree.
All right. Keep it locked on Inside Black and Gold. Okay, well, there's one comment here that I need to address before we go. Justin 156. He says, as a Saints fan, we cannot talk down on the Bucks. I got our number in the playoffs and have a more recent Super Bowl. And I disagree. At all points, you can talk down on the Bucks. They literally Tom Brady showed up, won them a Super Bowl, and then left. Like, that is the total sum of the Bucks' involvement in that operation. They were terrible before he got there, and they're going to be terrible after he's not there.
Yeah, I mean, I can't
to that team.
I can't knock the Bucks for doing something basically, the Rams did. They were able to,
I'm not going to blame. Oh, no. Very different from what the Rams did.
Well, they were
the
able to put it
traded for Matt Stafford.
No, I was going to say,
made the decision.
I was saying
Tom Brady made the decision for the Bucks.
I'm just saying, able to put all of it together for one season, and then having to, after that championship, though, having a rebuilding process.
Disagree completely. That's a very different situation. They were good before he got there, and then he elevated them to a Super Bowl. The Rams?
Yeah, you're saying okay.
I mean, they were in the NFC Championship with Jared Goff. We remember why, but they were there, and they weren't bad. The Bucks were bad. The Bucks missed the playoffs. Like I don't know if they made the playoffs in the 5 seasons Jameis was there. I don't think he definitely didn't. So no. they were bad. And then Tom Brady showed up.
I will say that Tom Brady came into a pretty decent situation, though. It wasn't like it was just him.
Exactly. And that's why it's hilarious. Because it was just him. It's like you could have put any quarterback in that scenario and they would have succeeded. Or
no,
plus,
not.
You go to the Super Bowl with Antonio Brown and Rob Gronkowski. It's like, this isn't the same team. Literally, all 4 touchdowns in the Super Bowl were scored by people who were not on the team when Jameis was there.
Yeah, right.
So, it's this Tom showed up, he brought his gang, and they won a Super Bowl, and then he stuck around for, I would argue, 1 season more than he should have. And now they're gonna just bottom out and hope they can get Caleb Williams. So I think it's more than fair to talk trash to that franchise.
They're the last team. Obviously, they're still the NFC South reigning leaders. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the Atlanta Falcons. Any chance you get, you're going to knock the Bucks.
Yeah. I'm not. I just think it's funny. It's like you say, I can't talk down on the Bucks. I'm going to talk down on the Bucks. Try to stop me.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see the post Tom Brady era what happens. Obviously,
yeah. I'm looking forward to it. I'll give Jared Cook credit for that. All right, and we're back here at Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. We're going through the mock drafts, and we're going to go through both of them in this segment. So we're going to keep it tight. Which, I always try to pretend that's what we're going to do, but then I lie. But we're going to try to do it. So we're going to start here. So For some reason, Steve decided not to put the teams that are drafting
Brilliant.
on his mock. So I'm going to have to go through that as we go. But we're going to get through it together. Right, Steve?
Yeah, that was just me being a Dumas of copy and pasting from, like I said, the Pro Football Focus simulator. And for whatever reason, they didn't put the team names in next to them. And I was just a lazy, you know what, and did not put any names when I submitted them to you. But
Simulator.
did recognize the problem.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on. So Bears pick number 1. They take Jalen Carter out of Georgia. Interesting because you kind of have the Bears at the top and you wonder what they're going to do with Justin Fields. Are they going to stick with Justin Fields and build around him? Or are they going to pick at number 1 and take Jalen Carter? Or are they going to trade out? I think if you're the Bears, picking at 1 would probably be the most inefficient way to use that pick. Because you can pick up a ton of assets if you trade back with like the Colts. You could pick up a ton of assets if you trade Justin Fields and then take Bryce Young or CJ Stroud at number 1. But just picking Jalen Carter out of Georgia is kind of crazy to me when you could probably pick him at number 4, right? Like, regardless of what you got from the Colts, because I'm pretty sure, I guess maybe the Cardinals at number 3 might take him. In this draft, they took Will Anderson. They're obviously not in the quarterback market. But I thought that was an interesting way to start off this draft because it means that the Colts actually get to draft their quarterback at pick 4, and that's Will Levis out of Kentucky. So you got through the top 4 picks, and you have not seen CJ Stroud.
I was definitely surprised when you watch on how far Stroud actually goes down in this. Like you're seeing right now, Anthony Richardson goes ahead of him.
Yes, the Raiders take Anthony Richardson in this
which kind of seems like a fitting pick right there.
Well, it's interesting. It's gonna and it's gonna be interesting when you see how this kind of went in my draft, because these were both PFF, and they went completely differently.
Wow. Okay.
I would be surprised if like the Anthony Richardson to the Raiders feels like an Al Davis pick.
Yes,
because it's like, oh, we ran a fast 40, get him in, But yeah, so you're into the pick 8, pick 9. You still have not seen CJ Stroud. Man, pick 11. So pick 12, you have the Texans. That's Brian Brzee. He's a guy who I think a lot of people have mocked to the Saints. We talked about this on Tuesday. And same with the next guy, Kalijah Kancey. Like, defensive tackle is a position that I think the Saints could go after. And so both these guys are off the board here. So that kind of limits what you might be able to do at 29.
Foreshadowing of what to come. Very good, Jeff. I know you haven't even looked at this yet.
I know this is a surprise. I should tell you, I have not gone through this. This is the first time I am seeing it. And I was actually considering whether I should go in and add the teams, but then that would have ruined the surprise. So there you have it. CJ Stroud drops all the way to the Patriots at pick 14. That's an interesting pick to me. Like, that would really complicate like the mood around Mac Jones, because you're already kind of questioning how committed the Patriots are to Mac Jones.
No, exactly. And I know there's been reports that have come out saying they're committed to Mac Jones for next season. But yeah, this would kind of make things a lot more murkier up in New England.
Another wide receiver going off to the Commanders, Jordan Addison. That would give them one heck of a wide receiver core. Miles Murphy, Broderick Jones. Okay, there's the Ohio State receiver, which you always have to watch for the Saints. Jackson Smith and Jigba going to the Seahawks.
Yeah, getting some more weapons for Geno.
Well, maybe Geno.
Right. You would think, I mean, that seems like the most likely thing to happen for him since, for the first time ever in his career, he finally has some success. You'd think they'd want to build on that there, but that's, remains to be seen, obviously, as he is a free agent.
Yeah. And they didn't go, in this draft, they are committed to Geno Smith.
Yes.
Because they had the ability to take an Anthony Richardson or a CJ Stroud, and they passed. So in this reality, you're looking at it. But I do think it's interesting, and it's Luke here points out, like, I do think there's one more quarterback then there are slots for teams interested in quarterbacks in the top 10, right? So if you put Anthony Richardson there, then that means one of the other guys is going to get out, right? And that's the case here. So like that's where, and I have, this is kind of in my mock where we kind of go into this, but I think it's a good point. Okay, Zay Flowers. So it's been a pretty heavy wide receiver first round because you've already had Quentin Johnson, you've already had Jordan Addison, and now you have Zay Flowers. Okay, we're up to pick 23. Dalton Kincaid. It's an interesting one. I think the Saints are going to be looking at tight end in this draft.
I thought that was kind of early, but I mean, it is what it is here when you're doing a simulator.
Yeah. That's the Vikings at 24. Then I'm sorry, no, that's the Ravens at 24. Actually, I'm sorry.
No, you're right. Minnesota.
Are you sure?
Yeah, it should be Minnesota.
So 21 is not the Dolphins?
Yeah, 21. Well, no, 21 will be the Chargers. You're right. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so 24 would be
right. Everything gets all messed up because of Miami. I forgot.
Right. The numbers are going to be different in mine. 24 would be the Jaguars. Then you have Nolan Smith going to the Giants, Andre Carter to the Cowboys, Luke Musgrave going to the Bills, Bijan Robinson going to the Bengals right before the Saints. So these are some frustrating picks if you are someone who wants to see the Saints pick up a tight end, pick up a running back, because these are the two that are probably the most explosive.
I was actually happy that Bijan went off the board right before I did pick, because I would definitely be tempted to go running back in the first round if he was around, just because it is such a glaring need on this team too right now.
Yeah. All right. So pick 29. It's even highlighted in yellow. You want to announce
I figured I'd try to do something nice instead of putting no names next to anything for you.
Dun, dun, dun. There it is. Why'd you go with Mozzie?
Just felt that the position is definitely something that I need to address for this team. It's one of the biggest glaring issues, and the fact that unfortunately so many of the interior defensive guys went off that board early. He was kind of left there for me. I was tempted maybe to wait for the guy from Baylor, but Mozzie just, I think, is this huge, massive load of a run stuffer. I haven't seen enough of that pass rush ability yet, but to me, I think he's a guy that has longevity at the position, that I think he could be a productive guy for years to come in the NFL.
Yeah, and I think you need bodies there. Like that's what's frustrated me the last few years. You just haven't added anybody, right? Like Jordan Jackson in the 6th round. Like you gotta get some like stud bodies in there. And then so you have Michael Mayer, tight end, going at the end of the first round to the Chiefs. And I think that's interesting. Now we're gonna go quicker here because the second round,
right?
Just kind of go through them. Nathaniel Dell is interesting to me. He's a guy who I thought stood out at the Senior Bowl. Like he was unguardable. Going down. One guy I don't think we've seen is Osiris Torrance yet. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I wonder what could be coming at pick number 40.
So up to 36, you have the BJ Ojolari, edge rusher at LSU, Josh Downs at North Carolina. Okay, you got the quarterback, the kind of confusing quarterback. The Panthers end up going with Tanner McKee out of Stanford. That's an interesting pick because if the Saints do really get interested in Tanner McKee and he goes a pick before them to the Panthers, that would be frustrating. I don't see that happening. There it is. I didn't go far enough. Pick 40. As I have successfully spoiled this pick for you. You want to announce it?
No, that's brilliant. I think you're doing pretty well. We mentioned the interior defensive line early on, and now Osiris Torrance. Obviously, huge need for this Saints team again, and just think that you're looking at a guy, great length, big time mass. We've seen him go from the Sun Belt to the SEC, still have success, and I just think it's a good fit on a team that's trying to build back the strength on the offense, which is that O-line. You pair that up with what you already have, and I think, starting to get a new influx of talent there. Osiris, though, I think is one of those guys that's going to be hard to move once he's set and planted kind of anywhere.
And he was at the Senior Bowl, so
there you go. There's that link
match
as
made
well.
in Mobile. All right, we're gonna go through these next ones pretty quickly here. I'm just gonna stop him. Dawan Jones is really interesting to me. He's a guy who I swear, like I've seen him in the top 10 of mocks, but then I see him in like the third round, and it's like it's wild to me how vastly different the valuations on him are. I do think you're going to end up being able to get him in the second round unless he goes and he blows up the combine, which he very well might. He's a giant. He can block out the sun, I think.
No, you mentioned that too. It's like depending on different mock drafts, and obviously we have Brian Cavett in the comments saying Torrance won't be there at that spot in the second round. I totally agree, but I could not.
I was surprised that he was still there, but there's going to be a lot that changes over the next month in terms of the evaluations, and also interior linemen, especially interior offensive linemen. It's usually in the top of the second round. That's where you start to see them go, because you're starting to draft at the top of positions that are not going at this was a wide receiver heavy first round, right? This is a quarterback heavy first round. That wasn't the case last year. So, that kind of shifts a little bit.
No, and he was definitely
I take it back. It was a wide receiver heavy first round last year. It was not a quarterback heavy first round last year.
Torrance was definitely someone I considered at 29 before taking Mazzy.
Okay, we're just going through here. John Michael Schmitz, he's an interesting guy. Kayshon Boutte going to the Dolphins at 52. That's an interesting pick for them. That's a really intriguing wide receiver core with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and then Boutte. You got a Waddle and Boutte. What are the odds they say his name correctly on draft night?
No, you're going to hear it pronounced so many different ways with different emphases and
different emphases.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how many people completely butcher it too, though.
Yeah, like I would be surprised if we hear Boutte at all. But hey,
Boutte.
All right, this is a surprise to me that he dropped this far.
Absolutely.
Siaki Ika, Jamar Gibbs is another one. Like I think as you get to this point in the draft, running back starts to get really intriguing. And it's just going to be like how tempted are you to go to reach for a running back in the second round or in the third round when he might be there in the fourth round and you might be able to get better value? I think that's where you have to start asking that question. Another former LSU kid, Eli Ricks. Isaiah Foskey is an interesting edge rusher prospect, I think. There's another running back, Zach Charbonnet.
Yep.
Jalen Hyatt, Hendon Hooker's best friend. All right, we're getting close here. Pick 69, Derek Hall, edge, Auburn. Okay, well, you got it. Pick 71, Steve.
I ran to the podium to select Tulane running back Tajay Spears.
The practice player of the week.
Big time homer pick right there, but I do think, obviously, with it being a pretty significant need for the Saints and what we've seen in his development over the years, especially this past season, this breakout year at Tulane, it was really hard not to add him to the Saints roster.
So I've successfully guessed both of your picks. I didn't want to spoil that one though, but yeah, it made sense. Here's one we have. He thinks Siaki would have been a perfect pick at 40 after taking Anthony Richardson at 29. Remember that for later. All right. So your picks to recap them, because you didn't type them on. Oh, no, you didn't type them on here. Actually, we can go through the rest of them to see who went. So Hendon Hooker did go in the third round.
Right.
So that's 75. I have to cross-reference this with my list of the actual picks. So that's the Falcons. So Hendon Hooker ended up on the Falcons in this mock draft, which this would be the second consecutive season they took a quarterback in the third round. So you would have Hendon Hooker backing up Desmond Ridder, and they're both backing up Lamar. I don't know.
That was definitely, obviously, Hooker and Spears were in my radar with that pick, but I wanted to go with the proven guy that was not injured in this case.
Yeah. So these 3 picks are interesting to me. I think all 3 of them are potential Saints prospects. I went too far. So that's Chris Smith out of Georgia, safety, Jordan Battle, Alabama, safety, and Darnell Washington, tight end out of Georgia. And they all went back to back to back
Yeah,
here. So like if these are
Darnell
guys you're
a lot.
looking at in the third round, this is where you'd probably have to get aggressive at 70 to go get them. But all right. So yeah, those 3 picks. You have Mozzie Smith, the defensive tackle out of Michigan. You have
Guard.
Osiris Torrance, the guard out of Florida,
Right.
and you have Tyjae Spears, the running back out of Tulane. I think if that was the haul in the draft, I think Saints fans would be happy.
I would hope so. I think there'd be questions, I think, in round 1, because I was even questioning myself with the Mozzie Smith pick. Other than that, though, I'm a lot more confident in my second and third rounders.
Yeah, I don't know enough about Mozzie. I
Right.
didn't get to watch enough Michigan games. He's a guy I'm interested to see more at the combine. But
His lack
yeah, I
of
mean,
pass rush is the only thing that bothers me.
yeah, and I think just from a concept of like you are trying to bulk up the defensive interior, so
Yes.
looking at the prospects in that regard makes sense. You do need a running back. This is a very much a need-based draft. Other than I would say Osiris maybe not be the biggest need, but he was just a steal at 40, I think. And so that makes sense. And like you're just banking on, okay, we don't have to worry about Andres Pete every year.
Yeah, it was surprising. I think my 2 draft picks from PFF, they gave me B minuses, and then for the Tyjae Spears, they gave me a D minus.
Wow.
Yeah, I was surprised. They felt that was a reach.
Yeah. All right. So this is my version of the mock draft.
Wow, look how nice and clean it looks.
I know. You can see the names of the teams that drafted them. Isn't this nice? It should be a little quicker to go through it. All right. So again, same situation here. You had Jalen Carter going number 1. You have the Bears sticking there. Now, keep in mind, we're not doing trades in this mock draft. So
Right.
This is kind of like the situation. If they stay there, that's who they're going to pick. And I tend to agree with it. But you see the quarterbacks go differently here. You still have Bryce Young at number 2. You still have Devin Witherspoon at number 3. But CJ Stroud ends up going number 4. So you're already seeing kind of this shift in how the quarterbacks are shaping up in this version of the mock draft. Then you have Will Levis going to the Raiders instead of Anthony Richardson. So you start to see that kind of start to drop down. Kalijah Cansey goes here, another guy who I think the Saints would be interested in if he dropped. And this is where you kind of get interesting, because I think if you do get past the Panthers at number 9 and they don't take a quarterback, I'm not sure you're going to see another one of these teams get really aggressive for a quarterback in the first round, right? Like the Jets, I think they're all in on Derek Carr. The Patriots, I don't think they're going to want to draft behind Mac Jones. I think they're going to want to figure out that scenario before they go with another first-round pick at quarterback, whatever it ends up being. The Packers, they already have a weird quarterback situation. The Commanders, maybe, but I think they have more holes to fill. You have Steelers, you have Jackson Smith and Jigba. Brian Brzee goes to the Bucks, which I would be disappointed if that happened, because I think he's going to be really obnoxious person to play for a long time.
Yeah, it's kind of when Vita Vea went to the Bucks. I was pissed off about that one.
Yeah. And then you're going down. So you see Dalton Kincaid going about the same spot. Joey Porter Jr. going about the same spot. Zay Flowers, another wide receiver. And you're getting down. Giants taking Michael Mayer. And you're here. And look at that. Would you look who's available? Anthony Richardson, quarterback out of Florida. And so I felt obligated to make this pick, because when we're going through the quarterback options, when we're going through the mock drafts, I've been pretty consistent in saying that I think he's going to fall through the combine, and this idea that he's a top 10 pick, I think is gonna start to sink. And once you get out of the top 10, I think there's a tendency to start free falling there as a quarterback. We saw it with Aaron Rodgers, right? And I think this would be the perfect place for the Saints to get him. And maybe if they start to feel a little weird, maybe, it's tough, because you're like, oh, who might take him? Maybe you do have to trade up to 22 and get ahead of the Ravens. If they are intending to move on from Lamar Jackson, this might be a perfect pick for them to kind of reset at the quarterback position. So maybe you can get up there and jump them like the Chiefs did to the Saints back in 2017. Who knows? Either way, I like that pick. If I can get Anthony Richardson at 30, I feel real good about it. As I have the guys who were tempted here, Osiris Torrance and Mozzie Smith, two of the guys you drafted. I was tempted to take here. I didn't. Bijan Robinson was available. He was not in yours. I did pass on him. But, all of those guys are interesting. And you'd see Osiris Torrance goes with the next pick.
Yeah.
So, I think this is a more realistic landing spot for Osiris. I think he's going to be a first rounder. And he's a guy who, if Anthony Richardson was not available here, I'm taking Osiris at this spot. And I'm happy about it.
Yeah, I think we've mentioned it before. While it might not be the sexiest pick that Saints fans are going to get all excited about, offensive line has been, pretty good to the black and gold in the drafts.
Yep, I agree. So yeah, here's Mozzie Smith. So he didn't get too far past where you picked him. This is about, if you're going to try to get him, this is where you could get him. I don't think he's going to be available at 40, maybe. Tanner McKee, quarterback, Bijan Robinson. So these are all guys who are interesting options for the Saints. They probably would have to take him at 29 if they wanted to get him, if they wanted to guarantee they got him.
Yeah, I joked with you yesterday, the other day when we were doing these mock drafts, and every time I'm doing a simulation, Tanner McGee is popping up for me for the Saints.
Yeah, I don't know enough about him, and
right.
I think how he handles his combine is gonna be a big thing for him. Okay, so we are getting to the Saints, and keep in mind I have the Dolphins in there, so they're technically drafting at 41. It's the 40th player taken. And another guy we talked about, there's Siaki Ika out of Baylor. PFF dinged me very hard on this pick because they saw this as a reach. And maybe it is. I think PFF has him a little lower than reality would be on draft day. And this fills that need that I wasn't able to address in the first round. And I really think you have to do something at defensive tackle. I don't know if you can get out of day 2 of the draft without bringing in a defensive tackle. The guys who I was tempted by, Nathaniel Dell, who I mentioned when we were going through yours, he was unguardable at the Senior Bowl. He really impressed me. I just don't. It's tough for me to imagine the Saints taking a wide receiver in the second round this year. Dawan Jones, offensive tackle out of Ohio State. Obviously, the Saints are big on Ohio State always. And then Jamar Gibbs, running back, Alabama. I wasn't ready to take a running back at this point. And Dawan Jones, I really like Dawan Jones. I don't know if it's tough. You're going to load up on tackles, and you really need to establish the interior line, and you just drafted I don't know. He's a little bit of a project, and I don't know where you would get him on the field, and so that's what kind of kept me away from him. But as you can see, again, the guy I was tempted to take was drafted the pick after me. So if this happened in real life, I'm even as this fake mock draft happens, I'm disappointed I didn't take Dawan Jones. So if this happened in real life, I would not be surprised if the Saints ended up with Dawan Jones.
The something you mentioned too earlier when you looked at my draft, very much a need draft, and that was totally dead on because I even looked at it as wow. I completely threw the Saints philosophy of best player on the board available when I was drafting, and really did focus on key needs for the team rather than the best player available.
Yeah, so this is why I queued up this comment before from Praise God here. Is they successfully picked the 2 picks that I made. We're talking about Anthony Richardson at 29,
okay,
and Siaki Ika at 41. There's Nathaniel Dell, the wide receiver I was talking about. I was surprised he actually did go. I thought it would be a reach to try to land him in the second round, but at least according to this mock, it's a good spot for him. Kayshon Boutte. I say his name wrong even when I'm not trying to. There's Jamar Gibbs.
It has you second guessing yourself sometimes instead of just saying it.
Yeah. So we go in round 3 here. There's Eli Ricks, Jalen Hyatt. Again, we're in a situation where Hendon Hooker has not gone yet, right? So if you're believing in mock drafts, it's funny. Dustin thinks that's actually my burner account that I just commented to agree with. Wouldn't be beyond me, but it's not what happened. What was I saying? Oh, so
About Hendon Hooker.
if you're thinking about waiting until the third round to get a quarterback, the mock draft powers that be agree with you in terms of Hendon Hooker will be available when the Saints pick at 70. In this case, I've already got Anthony Richardson, so I'm not even considering it. But what I am considering is one of the things that Dennis Allen said after the season that I found interesting was this team just didn't have a contested catch guy last year, right? Like you didn't have a guy who third down, you just need to pick up 5 yards. You're just going to throw it to him because you know he can box somebody out. Just go and get it. It's what you had in Michael Thomas for so many years, and you just didn't have it. Like Chris Olave is a great wide receiver, but he's just not big enough to be that reliable contested catch possession receiver. Like he'll get open, but there are times where it's like, okay, you didn't get open, but I'm going to throw you the ball and you're going to have to go catch it. And that's where I think with this pick, Darnell Washington, the gigantic tight end out of Georgia, who I think is a steal in the third round. And the reason he's there at all is because he wasn't even the best tight end on his own team. And that's not his fault. It's just the fact that Brock Bowers exists. But this guy, you watch him move around at his size. And I mean, how do you guard that guy? Like, it's the exact thing the Saints really wished they had last year in terms of like, you just need somebody who is going to be able to, like, you didn't need to get open. You can throw him the ball. He can box somebody out. If he gets a safety on him, it's over. And you brought in Clancy Barone, a guy who has a history of working with, these really intriguing, big-bodied tight ends. You already have a quality move tight end in Juwan Johnson. I think you're going to bring back. I think Adam Troutman is a project that has not worked. He can still be a blocking tight end, and you're bringing in a guy who you brought in your quarterback of the future, and you're bringing in an elite tight end weapon that you can pair with him for a long time, and also works really well in the power run game because he's huge and he
I
can
was going
block.
to say, I believe he's a pretty good blocker too. So he's not just your, offensive weapon.
Right. He's easy to get on the field in a lot of ways.
Right.
And to me, this is a very, very productive offensive pick right now and for years to come. And so that's where I landed with it. The guys who I was really tempted to go with a running back here.
Yeah.
As you can see, like Devin A-Chain, Tajay Spears, and Evan Hull are all really high on my list. But I just felt like I could get them in the fourth round, but I was not going to be able to get a guy like Darnell in the fourth round. Keanu Benton, realistically, I don't really care that much about Keanu Benton. This is more of he's the top defensive tackle on the board for me.
Yeah.
And so whoever the top defensive tackle on my board is, I'm considering it because I think I might double down on that position this year if the right name is available. So it's really just a question. Jaden Reed is another wide receiver. He's a guy who really stood out to me at the combine. And then Chris Smith is a guy who I thought was a really good kind of center fielder type safety that I think would benefit the Saints.
No, Keanu Benton's definitely one I'm intrigued by too, and it's curious to know. Obviously, these mock drafts, anyone's guess, but I just can't imagine him being a guy that lasts the third round. But I don't know.
Chris Smith,
Keanu Benton.
Oh yeah, right, and that's why I'm not really ranking the defensive tackles at this point. Yeah. He was the top defensive tackle available, so that's why he's a guy I'm tempted by. But it would really depend on, so if you're the Saints and you have a second round grade on a defensive tackle and he is available, then you probably go for him. I don't know who that is, right? So it's more of a concept pick for me. But as you can see, Hendon Hooker ends up on the Patriots, which didn't he end up? Who'd the Patriots get in yours? Did they pick Stroud?
Oh, I have to go back and look because of my terrible labeling. It won't be so easy.
Yeah, they picked CJ Stroud in yours. So in this one, they picked Hendon Hooker. So PFF really thinks the Saints are going to be the Patriots are going to be looking at a quarterback. There goes Chris Smith.
They had a lot of problems, obviously, this year. And, that doubt about Mac Jones came about for a reason.
Oh, yeah. It did not work out the way they were hoping this year.
I mean,
there's Jaden Reed. There's Devin A-Chain.
who was the other guy that was? Oh, it was, Billy Zapp.
Bailey Zappi.
Bailey Zappi was the guy taking snaps because Mac Jones was struggling over there.
You're mixing up with like Billy Zane there.
Yes, exactly.
And here's another one I found interesting. This is Drew Sanders, linebacker at Arkansas. Is going to the Giants at the 90th pick. He's a guy who, in multiple mock drafts that we surveyed, went to the Saints at 29.
Wow.
So like, it's a pretty wild. Like I mentioned with Dawan Jones, like there's a few guys in this draft where there's a really wide range of where they might go, and you saw that with a guy like Zach Bond, when the Saints ended up getting him in the third round in 2020. And like he was projected as a first round pick in some places, but then the Saints ended up being able to just grab him as a flyer in the third round. And it seems like Drew Sanders is kind of getting that treatment here.
Well, it seems like teams knew what they were talking about with Zach Bond. Unfortunately, we still
Right.
haven't.
Sometimes guys fall for good reason. Right.
Yeah, we still haven't seen him do much besides special teams.
There's Dorian Williams, who I think is going to be a very good player as well. Linebacker out of Tulane. And that's the end. So guys that are still on the board: Tajay Spears, Evan Hall. So if I'm still trying to add that running back, there's a pretty good chance I'll be able to get him in the fourth round. And so that gamble, I think, kind of paid off for me. And I'm still able to get Darnell Washington in the third. So I think that's probably, like as much as I'd like to see the Saints go running back on day 2, there's so many intriguing names on the board that I think it would make sense for them to prioritize that more early in day 3 in the 4th or 5th round. Because like, again, unless there's an early run on running backs, there's a good chance you can still get a Tajay Spears in the 4th round.
Yeah, that's a great point there, because you feel like the running back position is definitely a lot easier to fill than defensive tackle or anything in the secondary. The Saints have had success in the past with undrafted guys, but besides going to the NFL draft, this team's definitely going to have to address it with a veteran free agent too, I think.
I agree. You're going to have to figure something out. And so,
yeah,
if you're not able to draft a guy that you feel comfortable playing significant snaps, and more importantly, that you feel comfortable as a pass protector in his rookie season, then it's going to be more complicated for you. And you're going to have to bring in a guy like a David Johnson or a veteran, maybe even Mark Ingram, if he's back healthy.
Well, I just think, you're going to need even a more elite veteran than we've had in the past too, just because of the Kamara situation.
I agree. One interesting thing here is the Seahawks ended up taking, I want to say it's Bijan Robinson. Where is it? Yeah. With the 38th pick, the Seahawks took Bijan Robinson. So it's like they're just loading up on running backs. And maybe they do. Maybe they're just like, hey, we have a two-headed monster with Kenneth Walker and Bijan Robinson and Rashad Penny. Who knows? I thought that was kind of interesting. I did think the way that this PFF kind of did their mock drafts is interesting. I think, we can come up with some ways to, because we're going to keep doing mock drafts, and this is the first run of it. And so we're kind of learning on the fly here. But I think we can find some more productive ways to put these mock drafts out there. But that's the list.
Yeah, and for anybody doing mock drafts, I don't know how you go about doing a trade, although I was definitely interested in pulling one off, but it doesn't seem like it makes much point to do that when you're just doing the draft simulator. It's not like I'm playing Madden.
You're just guessing. You're guessing. It's like, I did a mock draft where I just accepted every trade back option, and I ended up with like 37 4th round picks over the next 3 years.
Right.
Yeah. Like, why don't the Saints just do this? So what I think for the next one is, instead of both of us doing our own mock, we will do one consistent mock, where the only things that are different are our picks. So we're picking off the same board, and like we'll still end up with different picks probably, but I think that'll be a good way to do it rather than trying to like associate each one. But there you have it. Those are the picks, and there'll be a post up on WWL that breaks down the whole draft order and whatnot tomorrow. So if you want to go check all this out, if you're listening to it on the podcast and you want to get a look at it, feel free to go check that out. I'll tweet it out in the morning once the podcast goes live, and you can find that on WWL.com. But that's it. Anything else you want to add, Steve?
No, yeah, screenshot it, send it to Cold Takes whenever the picks come out.
I think freezing cold takes would be like overloaded if they just tried to do anything mock draft.
Tried to keep up with mock drafts, right?
Yeah, mock draft season is it's already freezing cold before it even starts. But all right, that's the end of that segment. We're gonna come back. We're gonna do a mailbag. We're gonna keep it on the short side because we've been going for a while here. Keep it locked on Inside Black and Gold. And if you have any questions, comments, throw them in the chat. We're gonna get to as many as we can. All right, there were a lot of comments in there. Not all made sense to use in mailbag, so it took a while to kind of filter. But I've got them. Got about 20 or so comments here. First one, Chris P says, "Nice haircut, Steve."
Thanks. Supercuts, baby.
Super cuts. Steve is a 14-year-old.
Yeah, it got pretty unmanageable. And, I had the last haircut I had too was way back in London. So I was
right?
definitely in need of one.
Yeah. Super cuts.
Yeah, baby.
I don't. Yeah, I can't. I can't say anything. I haven't gotten a haircut in like 8 months.
I know I'm
All right.
I'm terrible with it.
I also have Jerry congratulating us for making St. John Butler's list, which I think you mean TJ, unless he did a list too. I know I was on a video with him talking about the 10 Saints players. Steve, you know about this, but I don't think he was ranking the channels. Either way, yeah, I appreciate that, Jerry. Chris says we need a new Funko Pop. So I have Bilbo. I have a Frodo Baggins I can put up there, but
I
that
was gonna
shelf
say,
is pretty. It's fallen several times, so I can't. I have to be careful the amount of weight I put on that little shelf.
I was gonna say, do you have a certain genre you go after with the Funko, or just whatever grabs you?
No, I just have a friend who like gives them to me as gifts. I don't ask for them. He's like a collector, and he just gives them, and I'm just like, thanks. That one I actually like because it fits back there. But I'm not a guy who will go out and find me a good Funko Pop when I'm bored. All right, we should probably start this version of the podcast. All right, and we're back on Inside Black and Gold. That was a long mock draft session. I told Steve that doing both of them in one segment will probably end up running long because we're incapable of doing this in a concise and efficient manner. And he said, "No, we'll be fine." And then here you are. But we got one more to bring in. We're gonna do a mailbag. So I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller, and the first question in the mailbag, and I'm gonna throw this to you, Steve. Says Saint for life. Ellis had one good year. I'm not breaking the bank or doing a long-term deal with him. 2 years after he has more time to prove himself, then reevaluate. And I think the idea here is like, would you sign Caden Ellis to a long-term deal based on what you saw last year? And I guess the other question is, what is a long-term deal? But what do you think?
Yeah, I would look to. I like what I've seen in his development since the Saints drafted him as a 7th rounder, and to me, I think he is a quote unquote Dennis Allen guy. So I would think,
Definitely
they're going to be looking to lock him up to a long term deal. I would imagine a 4-year deal for Ellis, 3-4 year deal would be something that makes sense to me, just because of what he showed you at progressing the position. But yeah, I'm not throwing a Brinks truck at him, backing it up and dumping money along the way. I would think though that he has performed at a level where you want to consider he's developed in your system, and I think has even more room to grow, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it would just be disappointing to not be able to retain him, assuming you can be retained at a reasonable number. Now,
Sure.
I argue with people all the time that say Trey Hendrickson leaving was like the worst mistake the Saints ever made. And I would agree with you if the Bengals didn't drop a bag on him, because they did. And you were never going to pay Trey Hendrickson what the Bengals paid him. And it's like, yeah, you get a 3rd-round comp pick for that. Thanks. If someone does that with Caden, it becomes difficult. And no, I'm not trying to give him a $20 million a year contract. But if we're talking $10, $12 million a year over 3 years, 4 years, he wants to be here and he's going to set it up in a team-friendly way. I don't want it to be like a Von Bell situation. Because like I was more annoyed that they let Von Bell walk than they let
I
Trey
agree
Hendrickson
totally.
walk, because of the contract Von Bell got. It was only like 3 years, 18 million. And you could have matched that. You chose not to. And that's the situation I'd like to not see them. Yeah, like, yes, I agree. He's done it for 1 year. You'd like to see him do it more consistently. But in order to do that, you have to make sure he's still around. So you're going to have to pay him something.
Yeah, to be to a Von Bell, he showed he was a guy that was one ball hawk, turnover happy, whatever you want to call it, was able to generate those takeaways, and just someone who I thought was a pretty outspoken guy and that had
he was a team leader,
a good voice for the locker room, and that one just perplexed me too.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of it, but yeah, that's where I would be annoyed if he ended up signing with the Jaguars for like $8 million a year, and you were like, we didn't think it was worth it.
Or worse, you see something like, we're gonna lure Ellis over to Atlanta with Ryan Nielsen, kind of thing.
Yeah. So I do think that he is a Dennis Allen guy more than he's a Ryan Nielsen guy.
Okay.
Just the theory. He does say really nice things about Dennis Allen.
The thing is, though, obviously, like you said, what if the ATL comes in with the bag dropping?
Right. Well, I also think like you don't want to let him go to Atlanta. You don't want to play
No.
against this guy. All right.
Definitely one of
So,
the most improved players you could say that was on the roster last year.
so Saint for Life here says Throckmorton has a low grade. He isn't that good. He gets beat all the time. He's a
That's why
backup.
he's a backup. Right.
Right. And I would say he should be the backup to the backup. Like he should be the third string. But he is on the field way too much. And like I like Calvin Throckmorton. He works hard. He's a smart guy. He's a good option to have around if you need someone to fill in, right? But he should not be the first guy on the field when Andres Pete goes down. Like you have to have a better backup option when you know that guy gets hurt all the time.
Obviously, the team thinks highly of him too, because I know he was a quote unquote Zach Street favorite. So with Zach not around, they still like what Throckmorton's doing.
Like he's a good player for what but you have to understand what his ceiling is.
Yes,
Right.
right.
You have to make sure what you're asking him to do is not unrealistic. And that's the problem we've had the last few years. It's Brian Cavett. Will Loomis trade away assets and reach for another project? In the end, Olave and Penning will not, I repeat, not be worth it. Fire the kicker. Oh, fire the can kicker. Brian wants to get rid of Mickey. I don't think this is going to be a year that you get super aggressive and trade up in the first round, unless a quarterback falls that you really like. And like I agree that I think he's been a little too overzealous with some of the trades. The Troutman one, for instance, I think was a bit much, where you traded basically the back half of your draft to go get Adam Troutman. But in any instance where you're making sure you get a quarterback that you think is the guy, I'm going to co-sign it. And so if that happened here, I wouldn't be mad. But otherwise, I do think this is a draft where you're collecting assets. You're trying to get players on rookie deals so that your cap situation is a little more manageable. So I would be surprised if they went up. But I disagree with this idea that Olave and Penning weren't worth it, because I mean, they're going to, like, if you have your wide receiver and your left tackle, then that's worth it.
Well, Olave was just also in Rookie of the Year conversations, and Penning, obviously the injury hurts his first year of development, but we've
I'm
seen.
not going to hold that against him. Like, I'm not going to hold that against the idea of drafting him.
It's just unfortunate. Obviously, he had the foot injury, and then all of a sudden ends the season with another injury. So there's concern with that. I get from your first round offensive lineman pick.
I agree with that, but again, it's like conceptually, like, drafting him in the first place. It's not like people were like, you shouldn't have taken him. He's definitely going to get hurt.
No, everybody was all excited about the fact, oh man, he's going to be mauling guys, starting fights every game.
And that only happened in practice. Here's Dustin. Anthony Richardson had a 3-game span this year where he went 0 TDs and 4 interceptions against lower tier competition. Yeah, I think one mistake that people make in the draft process is they get super enamored with quarterbacks based on like highlight tapes, and like, wow, you see the same 3 throws over and over again, and it's like he has some fantastic highlights, but like it's not the highlights that you're worried about. It's like, okay, did he read this play correctly? Did he miss an open, like, did he take off too early and bypass what would have been a big play? Did he throw to the wrong read? Did he misdiagnose this defense? Like, that's the sort of thing that you need to look past the highlights and look at the film. And I think he did have long stretches where he struggled. He's got all the intangibles in terms of arm strength, in terms of athleticism, in terms of size. He's not a 6-foot guy like a Bryce Young. But at that said, he is still a project. He is not. There's only 2 quarterbacks I would argue that you would draft expecting them to start week 1, and neither of them are Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, and I think if that's something where Richardson's a guy that ends up falling to the Saints, I don't have a problem with the pick at all. But if I don't know about trading up maybe to acquire him kind of thing. I wouldn't spend assets to go up in the draft to get him. But if it's a situation where things happen and he falls down to you, this team's got to start developing quarterbacks somewhere.
Yeah, right. You got to start somewhere, exactly. And the thing is, if you do draft him, then I think that would make the Derek Carr decision for you, because while he's a project, I don't think he's a Hendon Hooker project. Where I think you would hope that by the end of his rookie season, he would be ready to at least get action. Whereas, like, I think Hendon is a year, 2 years out before he's ready. So,
And I
like,
know everybody's big concern is obviously he's 25, 26 already.
yes, yes. And so, like, I think if you drafted a Hendon Hooker, you probably could still bring in Carr, knowing that he's going to have free reign for however long he needs. And then hopefully by the time you're done with that, then you have a guy behind him who can step in. Whereas, like, if you draft Anthony, maybe you do bring back Andy. And because if you're looking for a guy to be a short term bridge, he or Joe Flacco, I don't know if they're basically neck and neck.
Good old Joe Flacco.
Here's Dustin156. He says Jason Smith. He means Jackson Smith and Jigba would be a steal. I don't. Probably. It seems like every Ohio State receiver is a steal. I just don't see how this team could justify bringing in another wide receiver at the top of their draft board. But hey, who knows?
Yeah, it's a hard sell, obviously, especially when you see, the investment in Olave and then the development of Rashid Shaheed.
Says Mozzie and Cyrus is a good haul, but dang, a year too late for double trenches. I was screaming that last year. No way Jordan Davis shouldn't be in New Orleans. Come on, Saints. No ball. I think that Jordan Davis was off the board by the time the Saints drafted Trevor Penning. But they did go up specifically to draft Chris Olave.
Right.
So, like, yeah. I mean, I think if you were trying to draft Jordan, you would have sat and hoped. But yeah, I like Jordan a lot. I thought the Saints might go after him if he was.
Yeah, he ended up 13th overall.
Here's Luke Scout with Clout. Says he has Ika above Mozzie Smith, which, yeah, I think they're pretty good. I think they're closer than PFF is telling you they are. Whether one's above the other, I don't know. But, like, there's this idea that Siaki is like a, I don't even know if I'm saying his name right, actually. I assume I am.
Yeah, you're right.
But the idea that he's in the third round, it seems like a stretch to me. I think that's more of like an anti-Baylor bias than it is. Here's another one. It says, we never used Bong correctly. He's a 3-4 edge rusher. We converted him to off ball. I think there's merit to this.
Yeah,
I do not think he is at his best as like a roving linebacker. And it would be nice to see them try to use him more in a pass rushing role. But you have a lot of edge rushers that you're trying to work in, right? Like, I'd like to see Peyton Turner get snaps. So
who's that?
All right. So those are the ones I had starred. And let's kind of go through. Luke also thinks that Zach Charbonnet looks like Deuce McAllister. He's kind of like that one cut guy. Dustin thinks the Bears will trade down. That would be the smart move. The question is, can you get a team to agree? Because the thing is, if you hold on to Justin Fields through the draft, the teams that are behind you will be very confident that you are not taking a quarterback. And so if you're the Colts, the Cardinals aren't going to take a quarterback. And if you are kind of split and you feel comfortable with either CJ Stroud or Bryce Young, which I don't think you should. I think you should have a favorite. And if you don't, you're doing it wrong. But if they do, then you won't trade. So, like, that's where I could see, because the Colts are the team that make the most sense to me if you're the Bears trying to trade down.
Yeah, like you said, the biggest thing is going to be about finding the right partner. But what about, like, even, and I don't know, I'd be interested to see, are like the Lions really going to stick with Goff kind of thing? Would they be willing to make some kind of big move to get their QB situation a little different? I know there's a lot of different, I think, views of Goff's play. I'm not a fan. of the quarterback, and I'm surprised the Lions were as successful they were with him.
You know, it's interesting. In both of our mock drafts, like PFF had them taking Quentin Johnson.
Okay.
Actually, in both of our mock drafts, it had very similar runs here. So the Seahawks took Tyree Wilson in both of them. The Colts took a quarterback. In yours, it was Will Levis. In mine, it was C.J. Stroud. The Cardinals, in yours, took Will Anderson. In mine, they took Devin Witherspoon. And then it was Jalen Carter and Bryce Young. It's kind of interesting. They're talking about aliens and octopuses in the chat here.
Aliens and octopuses.
Octopi, I guess.
Octopussies.
Yikes. Miles from New Orleans. I'm not sure if he is Miles who lives in New Orleans or he is Miles away from New Orleans.
But
I think that's the play here.
Yeah, we agree. Let's keep Ellis.
I mean, things are getting weird. Dustin's all over the place.
I would definitely say he performed well in Werner's absence. I don't know if I would say he was clearly outperformed him. You know what I mean?
No, I mean they play different positions. I think Caden can play the will. I don't think he is at his best at the will, but he can do it. I think you want to see Caden more at the mic, and the thing is, DeMario is not coming off the field ever, so that makes it kind of complicated. But you do need that rotation. I think you need 3 quality linebackers, and he is definitely one of them. Man, like I can't even go through all of these comments because they're just nonsense.
What is there is no soul?
I don't know. It's this apparently. I think he thinks we're in the Matrix. I don't know. We'll close with this. Dustin, before he went off the rails, says pre-combine drafts are all over the place. Yes, they are. Everyone's guessing, and after the combine, we're still going to be guessing, but we'll be guessing with different information. But yeah, I think it's a good point. Like when you talk about like again, Drew Sanders, he went 90th in this mock. He was mocked to the Saints at 29 multiple times in recent weeks. So.
I know you talked about how you had the Saints getting Penning and Olave, but do you remember early on, was that still the case too? Or obviously not, huh?
I have to look. I was pretty high on Penning from the Senior Bowl on.
Okay.
Like that was the first time I got a really good look at him because he played in Northern Iowa. It's just I'm just not really exposed to Northern Iowa, right?
Really?
So it's a good example of why the Senior Bowl was valuable. But yeah, I mean, I was pretty high on him at that point. You know, the reason that the mock drafts were off at that point was because they only had the 1 first-round pick, and then they added the second one, and that's when I went with Chris Olave and Trevor Penning. But I think I did one video where I did like 4 different options, right? Like Devontae Wyatt was on there. I think Desmond Ridder was on there at one point. Kenny Pickett was on there. But the one that kind of like the official one was that one. But it's weird because the Saints will have kind of a bunch of top 30 visits, and that's where you'll get a much better picture of who they're looking at closely, because you can bring in 30 players to have a meeting with in your facility and work them out individually and take them to dinner and stuff. So that's like they had one with Alontae Taylor last year. They had one with Trevor Penning. Like if you're drafting a guy, he's going to be in that group.
And you had great knowledge from the Senior Bowl.
Yes. That's probably the one thing that I'm very disappointed in my draft, and that I know it's not going to be correct because none of the 3 players that I drafted were at the Senior Bowl.
Really? Okay. Yeah, you went with come on, Jeff. You went with 3 non-Senior Bowl guys. Come on.
Guaranteed that my picks are going to be wrong.
The Saints are even laughing, going, "Whoa,
this fool."
But
all right,
like, forget the combine. We know where all the talent is.
That's it for me. They're still talking about radiation and stuff and alien movies. Can you convert radiation into energy? Horror stories are spooky. There was one. I hope Atlanta rides with Ritter. I think he has a low ceiling. I tend to agree.
Like alien movies, like Sigourney Weaver Alien, or no?
That's not an answer that I possess for you.
Gotcha. I was wondering because I love the first two of those. After that, it's like meh.
Do love me some aliens. You know what my favorite alien movie is recently? Pacific Rim.
I don't think
Because
I've
the
seen that one.
aliens come from the ocean. It's fun. It's a fun spin. Have you never seen Pacific Rim?
No, I've heard of it obviously, but I didn't know it was aliens from the ocean.
Yeah. It's basically like Independence Day in reverse.
Okay.
They even Idris Elba even like stands up and gives like a Bill Pullman type speech. It's got the guy from Sons of Anarchy in it. It's a good movie. You should watch it.
As long as it's not 3 hours long, please.
No, I don't think so.
Good. Yeah, I like them. Them 2 hour movies are
Giant
more on my
robots fighting
speed.
giant monsters. I mean, come on. Good stuff.
Mindless entertainment for sure.
No, it's mindful. Be mindful as you watch. All right. That's it. That's the podcast. You got all the mock drafts. Steve is a Mozzie Smith guy. I'm an Anthony Richardson guy, but that's because he was still on the board. So we'll see. By this time next week, we will have completely different options. We're going to be updating this. I don't want to say weekly because we only have so much time every week that we probably don't want to invest it into a mock draft every week. But maybe every 2 weeks we'll do a new mock draft, and we'll see. Hopefully, if people like this, if they don't, then we can kind of shift it and do something else. But I think this is kind of a good start, and we can build from here. So thanks everyone for watching and listening. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button. If you haven't listened or subscribed wherever you get your podcast, do that. Give us a review, give us a rating. Very much would appreciate that. And yeah, you got anything for them as we leave, Steve?
Thanks for being inside Black and Gold.
Good one. Well said. Bravo.